Hello and welcome to the Minority Arts Appreciation Society podcast, where we're ticking all the boxes and bringing a minority perspective to popular internet discourse. I'm Josh, my pronouns are he and him, and I lead the music discussions.
My name's Tilly. My pronouns are she and her, and I lead the film discussions. Elon Musk is a lie.
I found out he's making the fake train. Do you see the Elon Musk train?
Oh yeah, the Elon Musk train is
The
crazy. I mean,
Hyperloop?
it's not. Yeah, it's just the worst train. Like it was meant to be like some mad shit, and now it's just this like it does nothing. It does absolutely nothing.
Alright. Today I'm happy to begin recording our final episode of our Joanna Newsom retrospective, in which we'll be talking about her fourth album, Divers, uh, where we can kind of reflect on this album and this entire kind of encounter with this artist as a whole. And yeah, we won't have a retrospective again for quite a little while, I think. I want to split up with at least like 10 or so episodes of like random older artists before we go back into like a deep dive. And
Mm.
and and yeah, but I'm super excited to wrap this one up. How are you feeling about that?
Yeah, I'm sad to see it go, especially because it just feels so much shorter than the last one. I know we got through Kanye's albums, a few of those albums in one episode of Kanye's, but this is four albums. Oh, I guess actually we have one on me. It really took a while,
Mm.
which was wonderful because I'm glad that out of all the albums it got that much attention. But I will be sad to see it go after like such a short time with her.
Yeah, same. And the next artist I've picked for the next retrospective is like objectively like worse. Because I wanted to see what it was like to go deep into an artist that is objectively like not good all of the time.
Yeah,
Who I think we both have enough interest in to like justify the sustained kind of coverage. Uh,
yeah,
so yeah, this was an interesting retrospective of looking at someone who's generally viewed as master of her kind of class. I mean, I think of in terms of contemporary musicians in America, I think Joanna Newsom's like one of the few who like it's really uncontroversial to say that she's like a musical genius. Like up, like
yeah.
she is like the modern. I don't know. I don't know who to compare it to, but 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 it was exciting to look at a discography, unlike Kanye West, who is that discography is so controversial, and
Yeah,
everyone has different opinions on like whether or not Yeezus is good, or whether or not 808s is good, or Life of Pablo. Like it's such like a polarizing discog. It was interesting to look at a discography that was completely unpolarizing, that everyone basically who has engaged with it loves, and kind of pass through our own feelings of it.
yeah, definitely. I think Kanye especially. We're just having any opinion on any Kanye album. I feel like, well, actually, maybe not every single one. Actually, there is an opinion to be had on any Kanye album that is controversial, which is interesting for me coming into Joanna Newsom and not absolutely falling head over heels for her. I mean, I think it's. I want to kind of cap this off at the end of this discussion, but she's someone that like I feel like going from here is where I'll properly understand how I feel about her. At the end of that Kanye retrospective, I had such an idea of what
Mm.
I like about Kanye, and it has grown from there. But at the same time, I'm really like everything I get out of Kanye now, I got from those reviews we did. Whereas
Yeah,
this feels very much like the beginning,
interesting.
and I think that speaks to just mainly her songwriting,
Mm.
especially her lyrics. But yeah, I'm just excited to see where it takes me.
Yeah, and I think this fourth album, Divers, released in 2015. Do you have any history of this album?
No, none at all.
Okay, I remember when this album came out. It was the first. I think this is the first Johnny Newsom album I heard of. Uh, because I was in 2015, I was myself 15 years old, and that was probably like between 2015 and 2016, like the years of my highest kind of obsessive listening of music and like following current music, like very like teenager mode, discovering that you're passionate about music and listening to as much as you can, with access
Yeah.
to like a streaming account. And back then, I was still using Spotify, like a cretin or something. And so I remember when Divers came out, it was only on vinyl and CD, and only on Apple Music, along with, I believe, Taylor Swift, who at the time was also an Apple Music exclusive. Um,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
and and I remember the album cover was everywhere. Like it was in everyone's kind of end of year list. And when it came out, it was like highly praised, up there with like TPAB, with like constantly being told it's amazing and brilliant. And I was like, who the hell? Why do I keep seeing this album cover of like clouds? Like, what is this? Who is this person? Like, without any context, it was just extremely confusing. Um, um, and yeah, so it was kind of this thing that haunted me that I knew was meant to be really good, but I couldn't listen to. And then, eventually it wasn't until like uni or so where where I'd start using Apple Music more, and I really got into Joanna Newsom. Uh, and 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 then when I finally got to listen to the album, I think I did save it till last till I had heard the other three, and I really struggled with it. Um, it's it was the album that in my memory, like I didn't instantly connect with, and I
Mm.
found a bit confounding. So I was excited to like come back to it, and see if my opinions would have changed now that I've just had it in my life for a longer time, and especially right after coming off of the first three albums. How about you? Like to kind of get into our opening thoughts. Uh, what was your experience like, kind of getting into this or discovering it?
Yeah, I when I first listened to it, I found it very perplexing. I wasn't sure how to take it following Have One on Me. That first track, Anecdotals, it kind of sets you up for it's a very just grand track, and I think going into the rest of the album, I had this expectation of something just incredibly bold from her from like for her last album in the in the retrospective. And what you get is actually like a really kind of weird cantankerous album with a lot of different ideas, and especially like a lot of very different sonic ideas going on. uh she changes her palette a lot. She changes even within songs how like tempo and rhythm and entire structures of music. And on the first listen, I just remember thinking, how am I going to reconcile with this one? And lyrically as well, uh, I remember starting to dig into it and just realizing how dense this was in comparison to Have One on Me. I think it keeps that same style of music production as Have One on Me, but other than that, it's a completely different beast for me. It returns to the density of her earlier albums, whereas Have One on Me, um, like we talked about in our review, has that kind of literary cohesion, whereas Divers is feels very very much in the vein of romantic poets, like really strong, vivid imagery, but the ideas to which it's alluding to are a lot more difficult to just, you can't just crack them straight away. So that's how I responded to it at first. So it's very similar to how you first responded to it years ago. I'm glad there's a sort of cyclical thing going on here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the album before this is like closest to in kind of tone and lyrical ambition is probably Ease.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree with
and
that.
I think this is even more detached than Ease. Like I think this is her most high concept, grand, bird's eye view album in terms of lyrical content, where the allusions to kind of personal emotions or parallels are even more kind of obscure. It's still there, like it's still like an emotional album at points, but I
Mm.
definitely feel like it is purposefully more abstract than Have One of Me, which I found was like very direct. So I think it is quite jarring to go from Have One of Me to this album. Although I do think thematically she's returning to lots of things that she was really interested in from Milk-Eyed Bender in terms of like this obsession with time and this like
Mm.
inevitable kind of I don't know, this huge cosmic kind of thing that's gonna come and wash everything away that is unstoppable, that makes us insignificant and small. Like this kind of the existential dread of that first album, I think comes back here. Although I think it's presented in more of a grand way than the
Yeah, I'd
first
agree
album.
with that. Yeah, I think going into the lyrics, she it's so there's very little cohesion. Uh, if you try and trace a clear narrative or a clear thematic thread, even through similar songs, it's well for some of them for some of them there's quite a lot more cohesion going on, but for some of them it's incredibly difficult. And Ease had this storytelling aspect to it. It's very like a sort of medieval bard-esque album to me, where it was very abstract and conceptual, but at the same time there was if you sort of understood base elements of those songs, you could kind of get to grips with the rest of the framework. Whereas this, she's constantly like disregarding previous verses and in favor of new movements, which is incredibly powerful. I think it's used to like amazing effect, and
Mm.
thinking about it, it really it really just excites me the way she writes on this album. But I think coming to understand that the different ways that I would have to deal with this album's lyricism was a rough journey for me.
Yeah, I think that this album, I'd find it easier to talk about it like track by track because I agree, like lyrically, it is, I think it is cohesive in themes. I don't think it is
Yeah.
as, there's as much of like a through line narrative as there is in Have One on Me, where I feel like we very, in my opinion, satisfyingly were able to trace like kind of a through line. Like I distinctly remember like disc two of Have One on Me is about, you know, rejecting the lover, trying to get physically far away from them, and then eventually returning to them. Like
Yeah.
it has very satisfying arcs like that.
Yeah.
Whereas here, you get like a song about the lead, like the pretty much the lead video for this, directed by PTA. Sapo. Here we go. Saponic,
Sapakanikan?
Sapakanikan. There we go. There we go. You know, telling the story of this kind of ancient city that used to be where currently New York is located. You know, kind of the civilization that preceded ours, and then confounding that with the imagery of New York, present day New York, one day being drowned out by time and history, just like this old city, you know, whose name that you know, I think many people would know off by heart, right? Uh, and then like 3 tracks later, we get like a waltz of the 101st Lightborn, which sounds like a Souls boss. It's an extremely cool title. Like I imagine like it's a horde of like synchronized fighters, like a DS2 style boss. But anyway, uh which is about like military infantry who traveled light to move through time and space, to colonize time and space. And it's that kind of like wild variation that makes this album like hard to pin down.
100%. And there's this like commitment to the thing she writes about. There's very little done for the benefit of the listener to get to grips with what she's doing. The result is like really powerful lines and just worlds that she builds within her songs. But getting, like I said, getting to grips with what she's doing, she does very little to make sure that you know what's going on. Uh, and as I was listening to that, it really made it hit home how much this was an album for her. Uh, I remember just realizing that I didn't understand much at all about it, uh, and kind of knowing that that was very much a purposeful choice, not that she intentionally made a difficult to get to grips with album, but she had her ideas very clearly in her head, and she wanted to make no compromises for anyone to get to that point, which is something I really admire listening to this album. And it was just something I was really glad to realize. Like that's where she is making this.
Yeah, it sort of feels like I don't know, she sounds happy. Like she sounds like quite
Yeah.
settled down and quite relaxed enough to be able to ponder these huge metaphysical existential ideas again and write these kind of epic showstopper numbers about, you know, cool ideas. Whereas Have One and Me felt very mired down by the personal and what was really, in my opinion, like obsessive. That it kind of portrays like obsessive kind of heartbroken thoughts, right? So I feel like the
Mm.
lyrical shift, yeah, it just sounds like she's writing from a lighter place.
No, 100%.
I guess to like hit at like individual tracks to draw out some like specifics of the album. I feel like the biggest like musical contribution this brings to her discography, to me at least, is kind of more prominent synths. Like in Anecdotes, there's a really great moment when the song starts winding down. This like humming, really warm synth comes in, and it's like a
Mm.
really surreal moment to me because it still sounds like really analog and warm, but like, synth in a Joanna Newsom album are like really out there for me. So it gives the whole thing like whereas the past albums possibly felt like mystical, this feels like mystical in like a sci-fi way. Like is there a word for science fiction mysticism? But I mean, everyone's watching Dune, right? Everyone likes Dune. That's kind of got like a
Yeah.
similar vibe, right? Of like conflating kind of science with kind of a religious kind of mysticism. I get kind of the sci-fi mysticism in kind of the topics this album goes for, as well as like the introduction of kind of more synths. It's not super heavy, but I think in terms of like what this does that no album has done before, I think that's kind of what this introduces.
Yeah, it's a really new sound for her, and I think um I don't know. I it's part of what made it such a odd first listen for me was uh in the rest of her albums there's been this real sense of like progression. Milk
Mm.
Eyed Mender to Ease makes just complete sense to me, and Ease to Have One on Me. Again, it's this natural progression, and I guess it's typical for a lot of artists to then go from this sort of like very well produced sound to sort of start adding in electric elements. But like you said, in a Joanna Newsom context, that's still just like really weird. It's not something I thought I'd hear. Uh, but I think it really works for her. I think well the album cover gives off just this very like grand mysticism to it. And I think it really captures a lot of that she's going for on this album, like you
Yeah,
said.
yeah. Like another song I really like. One of the shorter songs which kind of like puts this kind of the ways she is becoming experimental, kind of in the forefront. At least experimental new ways is the things I say, which is a really like nice
Yeah.
short little just over 2 minute cut, and it's pretty much just Joanna and her piano. Like it's very Have One on Me, a much needed interlude before the extravagant and epic title track that we get with Divers. And yeah, there's like this
Yeah.
haunting atmospheric musical saw which like leads the track out, and then it leads into these like reversed vocals. um, which is
Yeah.
yeah, it's this great surreal, like ghostly moment that kind of reminds me of like something James Blake would do with a pared down piano track. Uh, so I did
100%.
appreciate. We were complaining a little bit about like wanting more sonic variation by the end of How What I Mean. I do feel like she did innovate on that front a bit on this album, which I am appreciative of.
No, definitely. And that leads so beautifully into the beginning of Divers as well.
Mm.
I absolutely adore that transition. And you've just reminded me of how like this is probably the first Joanna Newsom album. It's the most conventionally structured album that we've ever gotten from her, which was something that leading into it I didn't really realize, but having a 11 track 50-minute album from Joanna Newsom is so is so unusual to me. And it it does affect my listening experience. I'm always kind of expecting songs to go on longer, and they still have this incredibly like but they have this incredible staying power, all of these songs that they all stick in my mind as lasting a long time and having this great impact. And I just think she uses like she does on the things I say, she uses them to the best of their effect by having really distinct moments. All of them have such distinct passages and distinct vocal inflections,
Mm.
that all of them feel really unique in my mind, despite the fact that this is such a it's a quite a short album for her. Apart from Ease is possibly shorter, but just having such conventional track timings was really weird to see.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you say that this is her most kind of conventionally structured album because at moments like for example with the lead single of Papa Canican,
Mm.
um I really love that song and it
Yeah,
feels like when I watched the music video for the song, which is basically just her like walking through New York streets. The camera follows her. It's very similar to the God's Favorite Customer video that Father John Misty did. Um,
yeah.
I watched that video and it feels like, oh yes, this is like music that I could see on at like a nice bar and like I can imagine this video being on the TV and like, every now and then you look at it. Like it doesn't feel as like I don't know, as like audacious as say putting on like Emily at a pub.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but when I actually like listening to the song, it has a wonderful pop sensibility. I do think like the opening is really catchy, but
Yeah.
there is like this almost labyrinthian song structure. Like it's still impossible to trace like a verse, chorus, bridge, chorus kind of progression here.
No,
Um,
so true.
like it is really still like ever expansive and confounding to kind of like how like what's the chorus of this song? Like I don't think she still isn't playing the pop songwriting game, even though this does feel kind of more accessible and more inviting and warm in some ways, like instrumentally.
Yeah, it does feel very warm. It really does. But like you say, there's when I go back to remember songs from this album as I sort of grew to know it and like pin down my favorite songs. It's incredibly hard to frame them in my head, and
Mm.
because all of them have that going on. I think there are a few that really stick with a tone that they've created, like a pin like bent. Is one of the shorter songs on the album. Not as short as the things I say, but it has a tone and a sort of main instrumental motif that it sticks to. But pretty much all of the rest of them have this disparity between themselves in how they're written. Uh, I don't know. It's part of what makes this album feel like it captures the point that she's at in her discography. This very like grand reaching uh ideas that she's coming up with. Uh she's very much I mean, she's never had a conventional structure, but at the same time, it feels like she's really, really moving to a point of abstraction that creates this image of her as having very little regard for us, the listener, which I just really love from her. I think it's really
I
special.
I in our Have One on Me episode, like my overreaching meta argument was I felt like maybe this is supposed to feel repetitive and um
Yeah,
exhaustive to kind of get across the feeling of heartbreak. And I wonder if Divers is meant to, in some ways, function as like anti-pop songwriting to get across kind of this theme of memory and time and how it will always like take things away from you and that anxiety. Like if Sappho Kanakin had a catchy chorus and this is a song that's kind of dealing with Percy Shelley themes of, Ozymandias, as you
yeah,
Breaking Bad fans would know, about kind of your legacy being buried under time, uh, and describing a city that historians kind of look through, and you get these direct moments where she sings, "Do you love me? Will you remember?" It so much of this is about again this fear of time taking everything away, and if it had a catchy chorus, I have to think that would undermine that. If this was something you could easily bring to
yeah,
memory, it would undermine that theme. But the moments in the albums that I do remember that I can kind of rattle off the top of my head are kind of these tiny moments that will stick with you kind of individually. Like they won't be catchy to everyone, but to you
yeah.
they stick out. Like for example, the at the end of Anecdotes when she sings come down and join, the kettle's on. I like that. I always remember that line, and I always know when it's going to come up. When I hear
Mm.
it, it's really familiar and warming. And I think, yeah, I think that gets to, in my opinion, possibly like the thesis of this album is like, even though uh, time is this overwhelming, horrifying thing that will always overtake us, it's these tiny kind of kernels of moments within it that kind of ground us, you know. Um, so yeah, I do think it's
Yeah,
meant to
there's
feel like evasive in that way.
she really captures the beauty in the inescapability of time, I think, on this album. I think it's like really well reflected by the album cover, like the swallowing of this gorgeous nature scene by this equally gorgeous cloud.
Before we move on to like favorites and least favorites,
Yeah.
one last track I would like to kind of touch on a tiny bit. I really like, and there's a really interesting stuff written about it. And this is also going to merge with our like word of the day segment. Um, is on Waltz of the 101st Lightborn, uh, where
I love that song.
again, like I said before, lyrically, it's going for like it's about like a lover waiting for their partner to return from their duty as like a futuristic time traveling military unit. There's been some speculation that perhaps like this is pulled from the Pinchon novel Against the Day. Uh, Attentive
Oh,
listeners will remember that Joanna Newsom starred in Pinchon adaptation Inherent Vice. So maybe who knows? But a really cool thing in
snaps.
this track is Joanna Newsom invents a word. Uh, the word she invents is simulacriage, um, which is a
That's
portmanteau of
brilliant.
simulacra and
What's that?
acreage. Simulacra.
Uh,
Uh, I did philosophy, so the first thing that comes to mind is Baudrillard. If you ever seen Matrix, that's kind of dealing with these ideas of like something becoming hyper real. So like rather than like an image existing to refer to like a real object in the world, the image starts to just refer to itself. So the example like Baudrillard kind of uses is like Disneyland, right? Where like someone dressed up as Goofy, which is a reference to Goofy the dog, which is itself like a simulation of like an idea of a dog, like this kind of like uh this virtual world. So in like the kind of critique of capitalism kind of place, so you could take that, it's kind of like the commodity fetishism of say a Disneyland, which constructs like virtual kind of monetized world occupying like real space to kind of cover up the real poverty in Florida, which you know, yeah, and then combining that with acreage, meaning acre, like acres of land, to paint this like really cynical portrait that even though like this military kind of squadron has like traveling through time, it's just going to be used. This wistful concept will just be reduced to like a growing accretion of like capital. Just more of the same shit. Elon Musk but with time travel, and it's just like really stuff like that where there's like really cool and interesting, exciting ideas here. It's really extremely cool that she invents a word. um, uh, but yeah, obviously there's in my opinion less of like the personal there, right? Like there's less there that I would personally emotionally resonate with, even though I do think she is still at like the top of her game of dealing with these like high concept ideas.
Yeah, it's the album because of that it's the album that feels the most to me like poetry. It's the one that I read the most as poetry. I kind of it's not so much about a story or a song, but the lyrics really stand on their own as this beast. And the music, I mean, while it doesn't to have any compromises to it, but the music just accompanies beautifully. Uh, I really love a lot of her singing on this album in that vein. The her voice in those sort of twinkling piano passages of Sapakanakan is just it's actually wonderful. It's so like not irritatingly twee, and especially in the music video, which is just it's very like sweet and genuine. Uh, yeah, I just think her performance is really lovely.
As someone who never found her voice irritating or twee, but perhaps maybe I will acknowledge it would be off-putting to someone who isn't inundated. I do agree that like the vocal performance here is very dynamic and arguably more palatable for kind of the uninitiated. Um,
Even
Eric,
just speaking separately from Newsom, like as a whole, I just think like there's the tweeness of that is a twee is something that's very nearly irritating at any time, and
yeah,
she comes not even close on this album.
awesome. So let's move on to favorite and least favorite tracks. Do you
Hmm.
want to start? Or should I start?
You go ahead,
Okay.
go
So
for it.
in the order in which they appear, my favorite tracks are first up anecdotes. And if you share any favorite track, feel free to just chime in.
Ooh.
Um, but yeah, it's a really gorgeous and atmospheric introduction, kind of back into Joanna Newsom. I love how like ponderous and drifting instrumental songwriting feels here. It feels like really spontaneous and adventurous. Like the parts where it swells up and dies down, like it's a really kind of lovely texture to it. How it progresses in unexpected ways. And I talked earlier on about, I really like the synthy warble that's introduced at the now hush little babe, you don't want to be down in the trenches. It's like, that's like unbelievably beautiful to me. Like, this is a perfectly constructed song. And it's like really heartbreaking when her vocal register gets higher during the part where she's describing like a mother calling her daughter down to eat and telling her that the kettle's on, and that part's just like really gorgeous. Lyrics wise, I think it does a great job at like introducing the album with a mix of like war imagery and symbolic surrealism of like scouts being sent from a camp in which like time personified is in. And like as the song goes on, you kind of realize there's those of like bird references. So, for example, she has a conversation with quote unquote Rufus Nightjar and Private
Yeah,
Porwill, which are both just types of birds. And it becomes clear that this is like the surreal image of like, at least how I read it, like a battle being fought by these huge birds that are roving the land. And this will kind of be a recurring like visual motif throughout the album of like birds and time kind of being the only thing that persists after everything else kind of it goes away. Kind of these grand sort of cosmic know, constants that will outlive us. Uh, and I like what you said about kind of this album feeling very poetic. I do think this is drawing on it's been speculated. The Genius page actually does a great job at highlighting kind of the ties to romantic poetry here. Kind of
Mm,
poetry about birds is obviously very like romanticism. Like Keats has the Ode to a Nightingale, and kind of birds is this idea of like quote unquote like a more transcendent or eternal kind of form than like any like so much romanticism about oh how can I write as well as the mountains and the oceans and the birds tell their truth like just kind of
yeah.
the human inability to match kind of this uh sobering grandeur of the world around us, which I think is a great way to like reframe the kind of Joanna Newsom problem of this kind of existential crisis. And one of the best lines in the album, with rushing, tearing, speeding home, bound toward that
Yeah.
is not my own, where round every bend I long to see temporal infidelity. Kind of, that feeling of smallness, right, and not having control, and just being quote unquote borrowed bones. So yeah, just absolutely just excellent song in my opinion. I really adore it.
I I genuinely have nothing to of merit to add to that. I think that was all excellent. 'Cause Anecdotes is also one of my favorite songs. Yeah, I think it's beautiful, and I think you captured every reason that the Anecdotes is beautiful.
Awesome. Next up is Divers, which is a beautiful gargantuan song. The video is great, directed by PTA, and with the use of
The
the art
video
of
is wonderful.
Kim Kiva, who also did the cover art. And I really like that video. Really captures what we mean by this album being really grand and slightly like emotionally. She's literally, a bird's eye view in that video. Like she is a superimposed head above these like magnificent, fantastical landscapes. Um, Lyrically, again, it continues the themes of like love and time. It's all very Proust. It's very Linkletter. This song's about a diver swimming down to bring jewels for their lover, the protagonist, and it's filled of like doubting followed by assertive resolve. It's kind of what I took from this. Like we get this like motif of lines such as the diver is my love and I am his if I am not deceived, as well as this like kind of play on this pattern of I don't know if you loved me most, but you loved me last, and I ain't saying I loved you first, but I loved you most. Like doubting the relationship, but also kind of affirming it in a way
Yeah.
that's really like interesting and tricky in terms of lyric writing. It's challenging in that way to me. Yeah, there's some really like lovely nautical imagery that runs throughout the track. I'm currently playing the Far Harbor DLC and learning that I just enjoy all things about boats and like in the ocean. Uh, and yeah, just gimme boats and oceans. Yeah, a woman is alive. A woman is alive. You do not take her for a sign. Is another one of my favorite
Oh,
lines in the album. Really good stuff.
that's a great line. Yeah, Divers is also one of my favorites. I adore. I think that feeling of her looking down upon everything is so beautifully captured by the contrast between those plucked high harp notes and the kind of slow, deep calm of her voice. It really sets her up as this almost omniscient narrator. And I mentioned how a lot of the songs change in their musical themes quite frequently, and this is one that really stays with that idea throughout. And so your view of this character as this sort of loving yet honest being just grows and grows. Uh, and the more I come back to this track, the more powerful this portrait of romance becomes because of that. It's a really like unwavering song that I really love for that fact. I really love her commitment to this really powerful musical theme for all 7 minutes of this track. Uh and everything you mentioned of just how beautiful all of the imagery is. Um I especially um I really enjoy the passage. To count your way across the depths of this arid world, where you would yoke the waves and lay a bed of shining pearls. I dream it every night, the ringing of the pail, the motes of sand dislodged, the shucking quick and bright, the twinned and cast off shells reveal a single heart of white. it's so like, and this is what I've come to love about Joanna Newsom, is it's some of the best poetry I've ever read, accompanied with some of the most gorgeous instrumentation ever. I think she, like, yeah, songs like this just really get connect with, I think, what a forward thinking artist she is, how ahead of her time she is in truly crafting poetry in this incredible sound. I love this song
Y-
so
y-
much.
Yeah, I really agree with you. And like, you reading that out loud and like, imagining it paired with the music, it almost feels wrong listening to this on like streaming services like YouTube or Apple Music.
Yeah,
Like, I feel like I should be in a great concert hall with like a little pamphlet in my hand with all the lyrics on it.
one
Um,
one hundred
yeah.
percent. This is the album that I most, when I was listening to it, I envisioned seeing it
Yeah.
live. It's one hundred
It's some
percent.
bullshit. My friend got to see this in 2015. He's about like 3 years older
Oh,
than me, so he had money. And at like a festival. Like imagine seeing this next to normal artists.
oh my god,
But
they could
anyway,
never.
they could never. And my final favorite track is "Time as a Symptom." I love the bird sounds that open the song. And even though the second half of this album does lose me a little bit, it does close out really nicely with this
Mm.
and the track that comes before it. Particularly, like, I want to point out the kind of amazing climax it comes to. Oh, I just got to say, like, my friend made this allusion to me that totally made sense to me, but the end of this song, like, really sounds like James Joyce. If anyone's read Finnegan's Wake, there's a I haven't read all of Finnegan's Wake, but I've read the first and last pages. And there's this really great thing where that is a really cyclical novel where the last line leads into the first line. So it ends
Mm.
with the line. It ends with "Away alone, a lost, a loved, along the river run, lost Even Adams," and that's like it builds up all this momentum at the end and ends with the word "the," and then it opens with "River Run" and then comma. Like you kind of get that tension relief, and
Yeah,
that's like reading it in a loop. And this kind of does a similar thing with the way she says, "Adorn, unmarked, undone, undarked, no time, no flock," like the exact same kind of incantation repetition, and it is kind of this amazing. Talk about this as poetry, like just amazing kind of constructing the words to like bring the lyrics to a satisfying conclusion. You get the good like clear thesis where she says that, whoa, editing Josh here, I made a mistake, I misspoke. The quote is, "Love is not a symptom of time, time is just a symptom of love." Okay, back to the pod. Which to me is like the grand kind of statement to quell the anxieties around time that this album has. It reminds me of the Nick Laird quote, "Time is how you spend your love." This idea that we are doing time by loving. We are keeping time.
yeah,
We are masters of it in that way. Um, while also kind of like, I don't know, like that repetitive kind of transcendent ending where she's like calling for this white star, white ship, nightjar, transmit, transcend, like this kind of like just demanding, like I don't know, like just something beyond words, right? Like I don't really know how to put it. It's just an extremely gorgeous closer to this album and just profoundly satisfying to me. So that's my other favorite track.
not one of my favorites, but a beautiful closer
Cool.
nonetheless.
What's your final favorite track?
My final favorite track is "A Pin Like Bent," so the
Yeah,
preceding song.
that's a really good
Um,
song.
it's wonderful. Uh, it starts, this beginning of it. It's incredibly ominous with this sort of more bassy, plucked harp notes, and actually, it's really quite similar to the way Divers begins, with that, with her voice coming out very steadily across it. Um, but it's completely blown away by when she like rises her pitch greatly and singing "But the Sky Over the Ocean," and the ocean skirting the city. And you mentioned earlier the idea of her as this, as like, yeah, as this bird's eye view of her. And that passage and the way she delivers it, uh, it gets that image across to me the most clearly. It feels like this all at once, all knowing capturing of how time changes, but as well the delivery of it brings this almost like ecstatic fear to it all, um, kind of almost as if like someone realizing their like true powers of perception for the first time. Um, especially the line from that height when the garden woke to meet me from that height was a honeycomb made of light from those funny homes intersected each enclosed and electric and alone. It's just kind of trivializing the raw elements of the world. um in this song she kind of becomes the very force that we've been talking about, this kind of all encompassing concept of washing away everything. And I adore how her voice
That's
rises in
beautiful.
those moments.
Yeah.
Um because it really just captures the ecstasy of that force, which I just think is a really wonderful idea. Um and lyrically in general, I think I really do just enjoy the simple phrasing at the beginning of the song. My life comes and goes, and then my life came and went.
Mm.
um and if that sort of dual phrasing feels like, I don't know, it feels like the ending of of like her mortal time and the beginning of her true force, essentially, of nature. And I just think it's a really, yeah, I just think overall it's a really like foreboding, ominous and beautiful song. I really love this song.
Yeah, I really like what you said about, I don't know, it there maybe being an illusion in this album of Joanna herself kind of elevating through art herself to this kind of magnificent beyond being.
Yeah.
And that's like a great conclusion to like how, I guess, how small we felt during Milk Eyed Mender to end at like,
No, yeah.
yes, I am time.
Yeah.
It's very good. Um, and yeah, my least favorite track is "You Will Not Take My Heart Alive." I don't have no, no, no. My least favorite track is "Same Old Man." Um, yeah, I guess those two songs kind of like merged together in my head for some reason. That bit of the album I'm just not as into. It's fine. It's just yeah, just doesn't do a great deal for me. How about
That's
you?
completely fair. My least favorite track is Goose Eggs. I
Hmm.
don't hate this song or anything. I'm just not a huge fan of the instrumental palette. I really like her playing with the harpsichord. Um but just those moments where she really
Yeah, I can kind of see how this would be the one song that is so twee that it would annoy you.
it's
With the
just a bit
harpsichord.
much. It's that bit where the harpsichord goes dee 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 dee. And I'm like, I'm like, oh, it's a bit too much.
Mm.
I do, however, love the line. Recently, a bottle of rye and a friend and me on our five loose legs, and like just personifying the bottle of rye as a like as an additional loose leg between the four between as well as your four legs. I think it's just a wonderfully cute like idea of describing just drinking with your friend
That
and
is very
like
cute.
lamenting time as an idea. But yeah, just overall I just it just verges a little bit too much on tweeness effectively for me. Twee is a negative, unfortunately, in this context, but it's there are moments I like in this song. Like I say, there's a lot of different musical elements going on in all of these bits, and I don't really. It's hard to dislike an entire one of these songs
Mm.
because a lot it just a lot of it sounds very differently to each other. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's my least favorite song.
Yeah, I like the song a lot. Two things I want to say about it. I think the instrumental that opens it up really reminds me of Sleeping Powder by the Gorillaz, if anyone's heard that song. And also, the first line of the song, all right, okay, hear me out, is what we built at the kiln that won't be stilled. Okay? And what this made me think of is the kiln of the first flame, Dark Souls. Yeah. And I think Dark Souls is playing with very similar themes that Joanna orients herself around. This inevitable kind of collapse of
I
reality,
really do agree
constantly
with you,
pushing
and
it
I
back.
I hate that about myself. I really agree.
And all I want to know is, as Joanna plays Dark Souls, would she play Dark Souls? And if she hasn't, what is her opinion on Dark Souls as a cultural object? That's all I want to know.
And at the very least, what does she think of the parallels between her music and Dark Souls? No, I'm really with you there. And it's the most, I mean, it's the most powerful ideas that Dark Souls
Mm.
has to offer.
Can you imagine like a Lady Maria style dual boss fight, but it's Joanna Newsom and a harp, and like one of her songs plays in the background? That'd be fucking amazing, right?
That would be wonderful. I do feel like a Pinlight Vent would make like a wonderful boss introduction song. I feel like that'd be pretty amazing.
Anyway, so excited for Elden Ring. Anyway, okay.
Ah.
Anyway, now, Tilly, to close out our retrospective, would you recommend Joanna Newsom's Divers and Joanna Newsom overall?
I would give Divers a strong recommend. I think it's a great album. Uh, I think it's probably the album that will grow on you the most. It's certainly the one that grew on me the most. Have One on Me was a very immediate, like, okay, this is fantastic, and I think that speaks to the different strengths of the albums. As we've talked about, Have One on Me is just much more accessible, really, and we've discussed today that there are some like things done by Joanna Newsom on this album that make moves towards accessibility, but at the same time, I think this is an album you come to after getting to know what she's doing with her music. I think you need the patience and the understanding that comes with listening to Milk Eyed Mendes and Have One on Me, to kind of not tolerate, but to accept the total Jackson Pollock-esque lyricism on this, um, and actually try and get to grips with what she's doing here. Because what she is doing is magical, really. I think, and it just brings another charm to her discography. Uh, for her as an artist, this has been a slightly more tumultuous uh retrospective than Kanye was, where I fell in love with his music from the very first album, even if I didn't love all of his albums. Whereas I had to learn to love Joanna Newsom, and I think I do want to go back to those first two albums, under a new light, and kind of get to grips with how I really think about them. Like after Ease, I was unsure if I'd ever properly love an album of hers, and now I'm like desperate to see her live, and some of these songs are some of my favorite songs maybe ever. Uh, so I would give a Joanna Newsom a strong recommend on that regard alone. Is is that journey itself has been remarkable. I've really loved getting to grips with her as an artist, and I think that's not a unique experience. I think she poses herself so confidently from the very beginning that you're gonna wrestle with her no matter what, and it's a wonderful journey.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Like, this is my least favorite Joanna Newsom album,
Hmm.
but oh, I don't know. It's kind of neck to neck with Ease for me.
Yeah.
But it's still like really great and fantastic and satisfying, and that's just a testament to like how strong and consistent her discography is. There isn't, in my opinion, a bad album in the bunch. And yeah, I'd give it a decent to strong recommend for Divers, and a strong recommend for her as an artist overall. If you are able to listen to her or catch her live or see a vinyl of hers at a shop, do it because it's great. I'm sorry that my dog is barking in the background. I don't know if my mic is picking it up. Um, my
A
dog
little
agrees.
bit of gizmo won't hurt
Um,
anyone.
Yeah. So that's the end of Divers and the last real episode we're gonna do this year of the pod. Between Christmas and New Year's, we're gonna have like an end of year bonanza episode where we try to channel jar energy and just reflect on the year as a whole. Uh, and then after that, next year's a new year. I guess back to doing regular episodes and finishing off the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Ugh, finishing off the Desperado trilogy. Um, and yeah, it was fun.
It was fun. It was fun. I'm looking forward to wrapping up.
All right, cool. Well, catch you later.
Bye.